And they shall make an ark of acacia wood, whose length shall be 2.5 cubits, a cubit and a half, and a cubit and a half. And you overlay it with pure gold inside and out, and make upon it a crown of gold around. You shall cast for it 4 gold rings, and put them in its 4 corners, 2 rings on one side of it, and 2 rings on the other side. You shall make poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. And you shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry the ark. The poles shall be in the rings of the ark, not be taken from it. And you put into the ark the testimony, which I shall give thee. And thou shalt make a mercy seat of pure gold, its length 2 cubits and a half, and a cubit and a half. You shall make 2 cherubim of gold, beaten work shalt thou make them at the 2 ends of the mercy seat. And you make 1 cherub on one end, and 1 cherub at the other end, one piece with the mercy seat. You shall make the cherubim at its 2 ends. And the cherubim spread out their wings above, covering the mercy seat with their wings, their faces one to another, looking at the propitiatory faces of the cherubim. And thou shalt put the mercy seat above the ark, and the ark the testimony, which I shall give thee. And there I will meet with you, and tell you from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim, which are upon the ark of testimony, all that I command you for the children of Israel. The ark of the covenant, one of the holiest, most mysterious and most searched simultaneously. The ark of the covenant was the receptacle, in which Israel had placed the plates of the Torah, after having received at Mount Sinai. They were inscribed with the 10 commandments. The ark was carried by a 40-year journey through the desert, and accompanied Israel during the long years of the conquest of the Promised Land, to be placed in the temple built by King Solomon. It was a long hood of 110 cm length and 67 cm in width and depth. The construction of the ark recalls in principle to power capacitors, 2 electrodes separated by an insulator conductors. Made of acacia wood and covered with gold, similar to other boxes coated gold found in Egypt, was placed in a dry place, where the natural magnetic field is generally 500 or 600 volts per vertical meter, in order to charge through golden crown around him. In practice the ark behaved like a capacitor. It was still a generator of unknown, uncontrollable and deadly force. So much so that the Israelites were to go back to about a kilometer during handling by those few who had access to this amazing artifact. The Levites. For anyone else who was forbidden to touch. When David brought the ark to Jerusalem during the journey, a man named Giza bent to hold him, but he fell dead on the spot by the powerful force that helped the Israelites to conquer Palestine during the bloody conquest of the campaigns of Joshua, in which Yahweh, the direct presence of God of the Hebrews, appears. One may not only symbolic presence, but a real military and technological support offered to a subject as important as to be considered the Dux, a term later misspelled as God and coincides with transcendence and spirituality. Transcendence and spirituality that only hit with the original meaning of the word, which represents a role model, or better yet, the reference point for the Jewish people. Yahweh. The Ark of the Covenant was therefore a power generator, or part of a more complex system of energy production. Energy that could be used as a weapon, Jericho, as a means of telecommunication dialogue between Moses and Yahweh, and other miscellaneous uses. The proof of its power lies in reading the instructions for building the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, where it was kept, the ark, and the detailed rules for access inside in order to protect human lives. Pyramid of Giza, Ark of the Central Energy Alliance. The first time the ark appears in the Bible is in Exodus, with Moses leading his people from Egypt, bringing this incredible artifact. Exodus, according to the Judeo-Christian tradition, have been written by Jewish tradition and many Christian denominations, mostly related to the letter of the biblical text, The book of Exodus was written by Moses himself. Moses, who was a pharaoh heretic, was definitely an initiate into the mysteries. He received the Egyptian priests' advanced concepts of chemistry and physics, and therefore knew how to make any device, thanks also to the unknown instruments of mysterious origin, which are impossible to find, but they were mentioned in documents and venerated in the scriptures, such as the famous shamir, small stone the size of a grain of barley, Moses allegedly used to record the names of the tribes in the 12 precious stones in the ephod priestly garments, worn by Jewish priests in the Old Testament, used by the high priest. The shamir could cut stones for the temple noiselessly. For this reason, when he left the country, he took with him the most precious thing he had ever seen, arousing the anger of Egyptians who tried to recover, but without success. The precious artifact was now in the hands of the Jews. It would be wrong to assume the appearance of the Ark Moses, because the Ark also existed previously with the same characteristics, as the best known in the Judeo-Christian tradition. This unique and surprising object passed from hand to hand through the millennia. There is a curious thing that is related that is considered by some to be the biblical pharaoh. In the representations of the Battle of Kadesh in Abel symbol can be seen that the army of Ramesses II had won in their tented camp, exactly how a few years later the Jews of Moses, from where it departed invocations to the gods. In the shop 2 vultures are represented with wings, which takes almost classical architecture of the Ark of the Covenant. So Yahweh, providing instructions on how to build the Ark, did not give Moses a patent innovative, but the ability to reproduce a copy already in possession of the Egyptians, and perhaps Moses decided at that time evading Egypt instead of having to build a new one. Where he was taken is unknown, but a match can help us locate where preserved the Egyptians and the use of their ark, that we mentioned its energy capacity and behavior, that is equivalent to that of a capacitor. The tomb of Cheops, which never really found any other pharaoh, or tracks the central hall of the Great Pyramid, was actually his eternal resting place, is in effect the necessary measures to contain the Egyptian ark really takes the according to one of the main components of energy production system of antiquity. While it is true that the ark could be an electrical generator, or other unknown energy, capable of producing about 700 terrible volts, then the pyramid, which was introduced, effectively becomes a large power plant ahead of its weather. How does this system work? To understand this, we refer to the research conducted by Mario Pinchel in his works on the internal structure of the Great Pyramid and the pillars that contain therein. The interesting thing is that both the Z, which contained the sarcophagus, is made of granite, a material that conducts electricity, since in the granite there is a high concentration of quartz crystals, which, as we all know, has piezoelectric properties. In fact, all electronic objects we know today contain quartz. Then the arc generator gold was put in place in the drum granite sarcophagus, which conducts energy from granite. Z also amplifies the energy, all assisted by the gold pyramid and part top of the pyramid that attracted additional energy from the air, probably directly from the ionosphere, exactly how rediscovered Tesla millennia later. Everything is then protected by large internal and external blocks of the pyramid, which are coincidentally in limestone, an insulating material. What had understood the ancient Egyptians? What Nikola Tesla discovered? Had they understood that the cavity of the Earth's ionosphere can be regarded as a large capacitor, whose armor consists of 2 concentric spheres, Earth and the ionosphere? The position of this capacitor is approximately constant over time. The condition of electrostatic equilibrium of the system is guaranteed by the physical mechanisms that enable continuous regeneration of the electric field. These mechanisms are responsible for much of the electromagnetic noise observed on the surface of the Earth and permeates the entire cavity. To keep this capacitor charging, power of 400 MW is required. Pyramid of Giza, Ark of the Central Energy Alliance. The pyramid and transmitter once stood on the top of the pyramid. It was probably composed of one or more large crystals and other metals, such as gold, and whose size was much larger than the ark. Limestone acting as a non-conductive element between the setter of highly charged energy and the transmitter, so that the whole mass of the pyramid itself was and is basically a huge arc, greatly amplify the power of the antediluvian ark hundreds or thousands of times. This power can then be transmitted through the great transmitter, which could be used to transmit radio, television, electricity, or if it falls into the wrong hands, death. Pyramid of Giza, arc of the Central Energy Alliance, Earth and ionosphere forming a large capacitor, whose armor consists of two concentric spheres. Now, we know that one of the upper layers of atmosphere, the ionosphere, is the driver. We are also aware that the Earth has a negative charge that exists in nature around the region leading the atmosphere beginning at an altitude of about 50 km. The potential difference between the Earth and this region is on the order of about 400,000 volts. Near the surface of the Earth there is a direct electrical field, in descending order ubiquitous in about 105 m. Tesla referred to this position as the electric nivea or electric level. It is hard to say if someday we'll get this knowledge, but there is hope, and that is, by electrical resonance. If ever we ensure that the period of the Earth, when disturbed, oscillating with respect to an opposite system electrified or known circuit, we will know with certainty a fact of utmost importance for the welfare of humanity. I propose to treat the period by an electrical oscillator or an alternating electric current. Another theory about how the structure worked: 200 kW, which requires wireless spread out by electromagnetic radiation in the form of radio waves, also known as Hertzian radiation. By the same Tesla claims its system resonance of the Earth works to create powerful vibrations in the natural electrical charge of the Earth. According to his writings, the structure had a dual purpose. He had designed more than was initially revealed to investors. His position could not only receive telecommunications signals but also transmit electricity on a small scale. He said, means to give practical demonstrations of these principles with a planned sample. Once completed, it will be possible for a businessman in New York to dictate instructions that appear instantly on characters in his office in London or elsewhere. You can call from your desk and talk to any telephone subscriber in the world, without any change in existing equipment. An inexpensive instrument, not bigger than a watch, will serve its bearer to hear anywhere, on land or sea, music, song or speech of a political leader, the words of an eminent man of science, or the sermon of an eloquent clergyman, sent to another place, far away. In the same manner any picture, character, drawing, or print can be transferred from one place to another. Millions of these instruments can be controlled by a system of this type. More important than all this, however, it will be the wireless power transmission, which appears on a scale large enough to be convincing. Overall, the system seems a Tesla coil. The coil resonates only if it is coupled to a capacitor. By itself, it's just a drag, which is a resistance to alternating waves. And this is where the Ark of the Covenant comes. Z is nothing more than a Tesla coil, connected to the Ark of the Covenant, which functioned as a capacitor, both included in the Great Pyramid, to produce free energy, taking advantage of the potential difference between the Earth and the ionosphere caused by architecture pyramid, but especially thanks to the presence of Pyramid N, above what traditional archaeology insists to find as the tomb of a pharaoh. Is it possible that the ancient Egyptians had already discovered all these things? Is it possible that you were in possession of such advanced technologies? Or perhaps it is more reasonable to assume that everything in his power is only a small part of a larger legacy, that it obtained an antediluvian civilization traditionally linked to the myth of Atlantis? Therefore, we can assume that the collection of science, technology, esoteric knowledge, alchemy and everything else belonging to the antediluvian civilization that survived the cataclysm known as the Flood occurred about 12,000 years ago. Some of the technology was transmitted through the biblical Elohim, which the Lord was one of the leaders, human societies post-Diluvian and jealously regarded by a small circle of elite chosen, who knew just use the tools and technologies provided to humanity at the time. In fact, maybe it was the same Yahweh, who contravened orders not to interfere with the path of evolution defined for men for the same Elohim offering people their choice of prohibited technologies. I am convinced that if investigations continue on relations between the antediluvian and post-flood society, we can find new interpretations to rebuild the mosaic of truth that we have, in my opinion, many parts available, but is not yet so clear the overview to fit the right way.